Hello and welcome to the Stage 3 Final Presentation, Final Project overview. So if you scroll down to Stage 3 on D2L and you click on the Presentation Guidelines, I give you the specific guidelines for the presentation here. So if you are a single person, you have about 5 minutes, two people 7 minutes, three people 9 minutes. When you are putting together your presentation, I ask that you please rehearse your presentation, practice it, and time yourself to make sure that you don't go way over or way under your time limit. This is about the amount of time it takes to cover the topic pretty adequately in terms of at least 4 graphs and telling a data-supported story. So if you're going way under your time limit, you're probably not doing the best job telling the story. If you go way over, then you are just not doing the best job consolidating and putting that information succinctly into your time. I will time you during the presentation, and if you go over, I will have to cut you off because we have a lot of presentations to get through. So just make sure you practice your paper. Okay. Down here, I give organization, presentation, quality of slides, quality of information. If you scroll down to the very bottom, I give you the grading guide. This is the exact grading guide that I will use when I'm evaluating your project. In fact, what I'll be doing during the presentations is I'll be sitting off to the side with a stack of these, and I will be grading you as you give the presentation. So notice where are the points coming from for this presentation. Being well rehearsed, seeming like you know what you're doing. You're not staring at your slides, wondering what you're supposed to do next. Good speaking skills. You're making eye contact. You are not reading the slides to the audience. Clear and well designed. Can I read the fonts on your graphs from the back of the room? Does it seem organized? Notice down here, prediction with justification. 3 points of your presentation is just having an XY scatter plot with a prediction and a justification. So make sure that you do that. This is kind of like including the total in the pie chart. It's the thing that I tell students all the time. Make sure you have a prediction with a justification. And then they forget, and then they automatically lose 3 points for no reason. Meaningful discussion of graphs, so clearly conveying what is the story and how do your graphs support the story, and then usage of percentages and rates. So make sure that you're using tools from the class, sprinkling that information into the presentation. So if you've got financial data, talk about converting to constant dollars. If you are looking at some change over time, you could talk about the percentage change over time. You could talk about rates and ratios. Just make it clear that you're able to use the information from the class in your presentation. So as you're putting your presentation together, make sure you are looking at these guidelines. 60% of this project is just following directions. If you hit all of these points on the grading guide, even if your story is not the best, or even if you make a couple mistakes here or there, as long as you follow these points, you will still get the majority of the points for the final project. Now, if we go back to the final project content tab, you will see that I've posted a great presentation example. So this is an example PowerPoint from some students from a long time ago now, which is what I would consider to be a 19 or a 20 out of 20 presentation. Now, keep in mind that this is just their PowerPoints, so they provided more information in their actual presentation than appears in these PowerPoints. But it gives you an idea of sort of how I expect this to look. There's a presentation schedule here. This is not updated, so I will update this shortly before the actual presentation, and this will just have the order in which people will present, and I will keep that to that schedule as we give the presentations. We'll talk about the final paper now. So the final paper will be the written down version of your final presentation, right? If the presentation is an outline, sort of structuring and organizing the information into that data supported story, then the paper is your written down complete account of that same story. Um, if you are working in a group, you must complete the paper individually. You may, of course, tell the same story and use the same graphs as your group, but you yourself must write your own paper. So, scrolling down. So, give you some details about what the paper needs to look like. So, it needs to be at least 6 pages in length. This includes charts, graphs, and maps. Um, that sounds scary at first until you start to think about it. So, if you have 4 graphs and each graph takes up about a half a page, that means you need to have about 4 pages of double-spaced 1-inch margin text. If you think that you need to have an introduction and a conclusion paragraph, and you need to have a paragraph for each of your graphs, that ends up being 6 paragraphs, and if each paragraph takes up about a half a page, you get to 4 pages pretty quick. Make sure that you use 1-inch margins, double-spaced Times New Roman font. Right, I understand that if you take the margins and you make them 1.5 inches, you can make the paper seem longer, which doesn't seem like anyone would notice when you're looking at just one paper. But when I'm flipping through stacks of papers and I come across one that's got these 1.5-inch margins, it's really obvious. So just make sure that you're avoiding doing that. So mechanics, trend line, and justification. Again, you have to have a XY scatter plot with a trend line and a justification using the language from class. You have to have 4 graphs from 3 different sources. They need to be complete and meaningful. And then overall use of quantitative information, so demonstrating understanding of the material from class, talking about rates and ratios and percentages and the difference between absolute and relative numbers and exponential change if necessary, linear modeling if necessary, talking about consumer price index and any of those things. As with the paper, or as with the presentation, I give you the paper grading guide. Again, this is the exact guide that I will use when I'm evaluating your papers. So it's got to be 6 pages. You got to have at least 3 sources and 4 graphs. That's 5 points, right? You need to have a linear model, another 5 points. Okay. You have to have a well-written introduction and conclusion. Don't skimp on the conclusion. Sometimes students will write their paper and they get to 4 pages and they put a dot on the end and they're like, I'm done. And it just sort of like ends in the middle of a sentence. So make sure you have a well-written introduction and conclusion. And then theme with a main point and argument. That's about 10 points there. Make sure that you bring in information from the course. Notice these are the 2 main sections here, 4 and 5. That's half of the paper. What is the argument? How well do you support it? How well do you articulate it? And what information are you using from the course in terms of rates, ratios, etc.? Last, overall quality. Is it coherent? Spelling, grammar, all those sorts of things. So again, as with the final presentation, make sure you are looking and using this final paper grading guide to help assemble your paper. Now again, even if you write the worst paper in the world, if you hit all these points, you're still going to do okay. So in terms of the due dates, the final presentation is going to be due to the Dropbox on November 14th by 6:05 p.m. The reason why I have all groups and students uploaded to the Dropbox just before class starts is that it makes it super simple for me to get all the presentations on the front computer instead of having like everyone come up and get into their email one by one. If you all upload it to the Dropbox, I can download all the files and then they're just there ready to go. So the final presentation files will be due on the 14th by 6:05 to make sure that we get them all on the front machine. The final paper will be due on 11/18, which is the Friday after the presentation, and then we'll come back and we'll have the final exam on the 21st. The final exam will be cumulative, and it will cover everything from the beginning of the course to the end of the course. That seems scary, but it's not really that scary. We're only adding a couple new topics. We'll talk more about the final exam next time. So that's it for the final project introduction. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me.